Emma Collins stood frozen in the doorway of the Broken Spur Ranch, her cleaning supplies clutched to her chest. The interior looked like a battlefield after the war, dust thick as prairie fog, dishes piled higher than winter snow, and mud tracks telling stories of countless boots. The rancher himself, Jake Remington, leaned against the kitchen doorframe, arms crossed, eyes hard as Wyoming granite. Not even a smile. Not even a proper hello. Just a gruff nod and a look that said he expected her to run. And truth be told, she almost did. But Emma needed this job more than she needed pride. Could she really clean up not just this house, but the broken man who lived within its walls? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma set her cleaning caddy on the kitchen counter, kicking up a small cloud of dust. She pulled out a notebook and pen, deciding to tackle this disaster methodically. Room by room, surface by surface. It was the only way to approach chaos of this magnitude. "I'll need to know which rooms you use most," she called out, hearing Jake's heavy boots somewhere in the house. "And which ones are off-limits?" He appeared in the doorway, hat pulled low. "I use the kitchen, my bedroom, and my office. Everything else doesn't matter much." "Everything matters if you're paying me to clean it," Emma replied, jotting notes. 3 days a week, as we agreed?" Jake nodded once, watching her with suspicious eyes. Like he expected her to steal the tarnished silverware or the dust-covered trinkets scattered about. Emma opened the refrigerator and immediately wished she hadn't. "When was the last time you cleaned this out?" Jake shrugged. "Sarah used to." He stopped abruptly. "Been a while." The name hung in the air between them. Sarah. Emma made a mental note. She'd heard whispers in town when she took the job. The Remington place. That poor man. 3 years now, isn't it? Such a tragedy. Emma didn't ask. She wasn't here for gossip. She was here because her apartment building had been sold to developers, and she had 6 weeks to find a new place. The security deposit for anything decent in town required cash she didn't have. This job paid weekly in cash. That's all that mattered. "I'll start with the kitchen today," she said, closing the refrigerator. "Tomorrow the living areas. I'll need another payment for supplies." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He counted out several bills and set them on the counter, careful not to let their fingers touch. "That enough?" Emma nodded. More than enough, actually. Despite everything she'd heard about the difficult, reclusive rancher, he was at least generous with the finances. "I work from sunrise to about noon, then again from 4 until sundown," Jake said. "I'll be out of your way mostly." "I appreciate that." Emma tied her hair back with a bandana and pulled on rubber gloves. "But don't change your routine on my account. This is your home." A shadow crossed his face. Hasn't felt much like one for a long time. Before Emma could respond, he turned and walked out the back door. Through the window, she watched him stride toward the barn, his shoulders set in a rigid line. Emma sighed and turned to face the kitchen. Dishes stacked precariously in the sink and on every available surface. Pots with substances she didn't want to identify. Cabinets with doors hanging askew. She picked up a plate with a dried-on substance that might once have been eggs, circa 2021. "What did I get myself into?" she muttered, filling the sink with hot, soapy water. 3 hours later, she had cleared only half the dishes. Each one required soaking, scrubbing, and in some cases, archaeological excavation. Under the chaos, she discovered beautiful, hand-painted stoneware. Someone had once taken great care choosing these dishes. As she worked, Emma found herself reconstructing the history of the house through its neglect. The coffee cup with lipstick still on the rim, carefully placed at the back of a shelf. The collection of magnets on the refrigerator from national parks across the West. A wall calendar still turned to May, 3 years ago. When Jake returned to the house around noon, he stopped short in the doorway. Half the kitchen counters were now visible, gleaming under their first cleaning in years. "I didn't think." He started, then closed his mouth. "Didn't think what?" Emma asked, wiping sweat from her forehead with her forearm. "Didn't think it could look like this again." He seemed almost angry about it, his jaw tight. "This is just the beginning," Emma said, removing her gloves. I found a stack of mail behind the toaster. Some of it looks important. Jake's eyes darkened. Leave the mail. That's not what I'm paying you for. Emma nodded, recognizing the boundary. I'll be back tomorrow. Same time. As she gathered her things, she noticed Jake standing in the middle of the kitchen, looking lost in his own home, like a man who had just woken from a long, dark sleep to find the world had continued without him. Emma arrived at sunrise the next day, armed with supplies purchased from the hardware store in town. The elderly cashier had raised his eyebrows when Emma mentioned where she was working. Remington Place? Good luck with that one. Man's been a ghost since Sarah passed. Now, as Emma unloaded her car, she noticed Jake in the corral, working with a chestnut mare. His movements were gentle despite his gruff demeanor. The horse responded to the slightest pressure from his hands. Inside, Emma decided to tackle the living room. She started moving stacks of newspapers and mail to sort through them when Jake appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? His voice was sharp. Cleaning, Emma replied simply. These need to be sorted. I know where everything is. Don't move my things. Emma stood her ground. Mr. Remington, this isn't organization. This is hoarding. If you want me to clean properly, I need to move things. Jake's jaw tightened. There might be important papers in there. Then we'll find them and put them somewhere you can actually access them. Emma gestured to the chaotic piles. Can you honestly tell me you know what's in each of these stacks? Before Jake could answer, a truck pulled into the driveway. He glanced out the window and swore under his breath. Frank Carter, he muttered. Nosy neighbor. A tall man with silver hair and a weather-beaten face strolled through the open front door without knocking. He stopped short when he saw Emma. Well, I'll be. The rumors are true. Frank extended a calloused hand. Frank Carter, neighboring ranch. You must be the cleaning lady folks are talking about in town. Emma shook his hand. Emma Collins. Frank looked around, whistling low. Brave woman. I told Jake here 3. Hand down her neck. Easy, Penny, he murmured. What happened to your face, mister? The smallest boy asked, earning a shove from his friend. Thomas met the child's gaze. Fire, he said simply. War has a way of marking a man. The innkeeper appeared, shooing the boys away before addressing Thomas without quite looking at him. Best stable her at Colton's down the street. Can't have her tied up here all day. Thomas nodded, untying Penny's reins. As he led her down the street, he felt the weight of stairs heavier than any pack he'd carried through battle. Colton's livery was quiet, smelling of hay and leather. A grizzled man emerged from the shadows, eyeing Thomas and the mare. Fine animal, he said, admiring Penny without sparing a glance at Thomas's scars. Army trained. Yes, sir. 5th Cavalry. The old man nodded. Thought so. Got the look. 2 bits a day, includes feed. As Thomas handed over the coins, a voice called from the entrance. Reed. Thought that was you. Sheriff Parker strode forward, hand extended. Thomas took it, surprised at the genuine welcome. Been a few years, Parker said. Last saw you at Fort Laramie, wasn't it? Yes, sir. Before the fire. Parker nodded, understanding in his eyes. Heard you rode with Captain Hayes after that. Tough outfit. For a time. The sheriff adjusted his hat. Well, you're welcome in Whistling Pines, though folks here take time warming to strangers. He lowered his voice. Especially ones that look different. Thomas's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile on a face less damaged. Hadn't noticed. Need work while you're here? Wouldn't turn it down. Colton could use help. His boy left for Denver last spring. Parker glanced at the livery owner, who gave a non-committal shrug that wasn't quite a refusal. As the sheriff left, Thomas began unsaddling Penny, the familiar routine soothing. From the livery entrance, he caught another glimpse of the limping woman, now making her way carefully across the street. There was something in her downcast posture that struck him, a deliberate attempt at invisibility he recognized all too well. While the world stared at his scars, hers seemed to be the kind folks pretended not to see. Thomas wasn't sure which was worse. Evening settled over Whistling Pines like a sigh. Eleanor climbed the narrow stairs to her room, each step a negotiation with her stubborn leg. The day's fatigue clung to her shoulders, but there was comfort in routine, washing up, changing into her nightdress, lighting the lamp on her small table. This hour belonged to her alone. From beneath her bed, she withdrew a leather portfolio tied with string. Inside lay dozens of sketches, sweeping landscapes, towering mountains, endless prairies she'd never seen but imagined from descriptions in the dog-eared novels Mrs. Miller lent her. Her fingers, nimble despite the day's work, moved the charcoal in practice strokes. Tonight's drawing took shape, a copper mare with an arched neck and intelligent eyes. Eleanor paused, considering whether to include the rider. The stranger's face would be difficult to capture, not because of his scars, but because of what she'd glimpsed beneath them. A dignity that refused to cower. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Eleanor? It's Sarah." Eleanor hastily covered her drawing. "Come in." Sarah Bennett entered with a rustle of skirts and the scent of lavender. At 23, the seamstress's daughter was Eleanor's only real friend in Whistling Pines, though their lives could hardly be more different. "I brought the ribbon you wanted," Sarah said, placing a package on the table. Her eyes drifted to the partially concealed drawing. "Still dreaming of faraway places?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "It passes the time." Speaking of time, Sarah perched on the edge of the bed, eyes bright with excitement. "Have you heard about the Founders' Day celebration? 6 weeks away, and Father says it'll be the biggest yet." Eleanor's smile faltered. Town celebrations meant crowds, dancing, and inevitable reminders of what she could never be. "Mother's making my dress already," Sarah continued, oblivious to Eleanor's discomfort. "You should let her make you something too. Blues to match your eyes." "Who would I dress for?" Eleanor's question held no self-pity, only pragmatism. Sarah squeezed her hand. "For yourself. Besides," she lowered her voice dramatically, "have you seen the newcomer? Scars aside, there's something about him." Heat crept up Eleanor's neck. "Mrs. Miller mentioned him. They're calling him the Beast of Whistling Pines at the saloon," Sarah confided. "But Sheriff Parker vouched for him. War hero, apparently." Eleanor's fingers drifted to her drawing. "People are cruel when they're afraid of differences." Sarah's expression softened with understanding. "Yes, they are." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "Think about the dress. For me." After Sarah left, Eleanor uncovered her drawing, staring at the incomplete rider. "War hero." The words settled strangely in her chest. Across town, Thomas sat on his boarding house bed, lamp burning low as he cleaned tack with practiced hands. Colton had hired him that afternoon, grudgingly at first, then with growing appreciation as Thomas demonstrated his way with troubled horses. On the wall outside his window, a notice caught his eye. Newly posted on the town's bulletin board, it announced the upcoming Founders' Day celebration, a week of festivities culminating in a grand social at the town hall. Thomas had no interest in such affairs. He'd learned long ago that his presence made people uncomfortable at best, frightened at worst. But something about this town made him reluctant to simply pass through as he had so many others. Perhaps it was Sheriff Parker's unexpected welcome. Or Colton's gruff but fair manner once he'd seen Thomas's skill with horses. Or maybe, though he scarcely admitted it to himself, it was the glimpse of a chestnut-haired woman whose eyes, unlike every other person in town, hadn't immediately darted away from his scars the one time their gazes had briefly met across the street. Thomas extinguished his lamp. Tomorrow would bring what it would. For tonight, it was enough to have a job, a roof, and the distant possibility that Whistling Pines might prove different from the other towns where he'd sought but never found a place to belong. 3 days passed before Mrs. Miller handed Eleanor the supply list with an apologetic smile. "Colton needs these items for the livery. Would you mind taking the list over? His new hand might need help selecting the right things." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "I could prepare the order for pickup." "Nonsense. The exercise will do you good." Mrs. Miller's tone was kind but firm. "Besides, I need to know what Colton plans for that new stall before Founders' Day." The midday sun beat down as Eleanor made her way toward the livery, the supply. "About your boundaries instead of getting angry after I've crossed them unknowingly." Jake studied her for a long moment. "Fair enough. Emma gestured to his papers. What are you working on? Jake hesitated, then turned one of the papers toward her. It was a hand-drawn map of the Broken Spur property. Carter wasn't lying about the developers, he said. Silvercrest Development has been buying up ranches all around us. They want to build a resort and golf course. Emma examined the map. The boundaries of the Broken Spur were outlined in blue, with red markings showing neighboring properties. They've made offers on 3 sides of us now, Jake continued. They want our water rights. The creek that runs through the north pasture is the reason they're so interested. And you don't want to sell? Jake's expression hardened. This land has been in my family for 4 generations. My grandfather homesteaded here. My father expanded it. I promised him I'd keep it going. Emma nodded, understanding. That's why the financial struggles hit so hard. Jake looked away. Sarah had ideas to diversify. Make the place more sustainable. His voice grew quiet. She was right as usual. It was the most he'd shared about his late wife without anger or bitterness. Emma tread carefully. Her ideas about guest cabins and trail rides? Jake looked surprised. Miguel has a big mouth. He cares about this place. About you too, I think. Jake grunted, neither confirming nor denying. He folded up the map and tucked it away. I'll be in the east pasture today. Fence needs mending. After he left, Emma turned her attention to the dining room. Like every other space, it was filled with clutter and dust. But beneath the neglect, she could see quality furnishings. A solid oak table, a beautiful china cabinet. Around noon, Emma stepped outside for fresh air. She spotted Jake in the distance, working with horses in the corral. Curious, she walked closer. Jake was guiding a young palomino through a series of movements. His body language was completely different from his interactions with people, patient, gentle, communicative. The horse responded beautifully to his subtle cues. When Jake noticed her watching, he didn't scowl as she expected. Instead, he gestured for her to come closer. This is Sunny, he said as Emma approached the fence. She's learning manners. She's beautiful, Emma said, admiring the golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. Want to meet her? Surprised by the offer, Emma nodded. Jake opened the gate and motioned her in, showing her how to approach with her hand extended, palm down. Let her come to you, he instructed. The horse sniffed Emma's hand, then bumped it gently with her nose. She likes you, Jake said, and Emma caught the ghost of a smile on his face. Horses are good judges of character, Emma replied. Better than people, usually. Jake patted Sunny's neck. You ever ride? Not since I was a kid. My grandfather had a few horses. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Maybe sometime. He left the sentence unfinished, but the offer hung in the air between them. Later, as they sat on the porch eating sandwiches Emma had prepared, she noticed Jake watching her. What? She asked. Nothing, he said. Just not used to having someone around who isn't afraid to speak their mind. Does it bother you? Jake considered this. No, he said finally. It's refreshing. It wasn't much, but Emma recognized it for what it was. A small step across the boundary lines they'd both drawn. 2 weeks into Emma's employment, the Broken Spur was slowly transforming. The kitchen gleamed, the living room had emerged from its cocoon of clutter, and even the front porch had been swept and adorned with the newly cleaned rocking chairs Emma had discovered in the storage shed. She was scrubbing the entryway floor when the sound of tires on gravel announced visitors. Through the window, Emma saw a sleek SUV pull up. A well-dressed couple emerged, the woman tall and elegant with hair the same rich brown as Jake's, the man in expensive-looking casual wear that screamed, "City." Emma opened the door before they could knock. Hello. Can I help you? The woman's eyebrows shot up in surprise. The house, it looks different. She extended a manicured hand. I'm Melissa Remington Pearson, Jake's sister. This is my husband, David. Emma Collins. The cleaning lady, Melissa finished, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Word travels, even to Denver. May we come in? Emma stepped aside, feeling suddenly self-conscious in her worn jeans and t-shirt. Jake's out checking cattle, she explained. He should be back soon. Melissa walked through the living room, running a finger along a now dustless shelf. I hardly recognize the place. Last time we visited, I could barely find a place to sit. David wandered to the window. Still looks like hell outside. Barn needs painting, fences sagging. Emma bristled at his dismissive tone. Jake works from sunrise to sunset on this ranch. Maintaining appearances was always Sarah's department, Melissa said, her voice tinged with something Emma couldn't quite identify. My brother? Well, he's been struggling since she passed. Before Emma could respond, the back door opened, and Jake entered. He froze when he saw his sister. Mel. Wasn't expecting you. Clearly, Melissa replied, gesturing to her brother's dusty clothes. We left messages. Jake's jaw tightened. Been busy. An uncomfortable silence fell. Emma began gathering her cleaning supplies. I should go and let you visit with your family. No, Jake said quickly. Sit. You're working. Melissa's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked between them. Actually, Emma, would you mind showing me around? I'd love to see what you've accomplished. Before Jake could object, Melissa linked her arm through Emma's and steered her toward the kitchen. Once they were alone, Melissa's friendly facade slipped. How long have you been working here? About 2 weeks, Emma answered. And my brother? How is he? Really? Emma chose her words carefully. He's private. Focused on his work. Melissa sighed, fingering a silk scarf around her neck. Jake hasn't been the same since Sarah died. They were college sweethearts, you know. She was the outgoing one, full of plans and dreams. Jake was content to follow her lead. She lowered her voice. The accident destroyed him. He found her, thrown from her horse, neck broken. Emma's stomach clenched. I'm so sorry. The thing is, Melissa continued, removing her scarf and folding it precisely, Jake blames himself. He was supposed to ride with her that day, but he was fixing fences instead. He thinks he could have prevented it. She placed the scarf on the counter. I'm worried he's punishing himself. Living in squalor, pushing everyone away. Emma thought of the locked room she hadn't yet been allowed to enter. He's grieving. For 3 years. Melissa shook her head. It's not healthy. We've tried to get him to sell the ranch, move closer to us in Denver. Start fresh. It's his home, Emma said, surprised by her own defensiveness. Melissa studied her with new interest. You care about him. I care about my job, Emma corrected. And doing it well. Of course. Melissa's smile was knowing. Just remember, Jake Remington is a man haunted by ghosts. And ghosts don't make good company. When they returned to the living room, Jake and David were in a heated discussion about the developers. Just consider their offer, David was saying. It's more than fair given the state of the place. Not interested, Jake growled. You're being stubborn, Melissa interjected. The ranch is failing, Jake. Everyone can see it but you. Thunder rumbled in the distance as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The approaching storm seemed fitting for the tension in the room. Melissa and David departed as the first fat raindrops began to fall, leaving behind an atmosphere as charged as the storm clouds overhead. Jake stood on the porch, watching their taillights disappear down the long driveway. You should go too, he said to Emma, still inside gathering her things. Storm's coming in fast. Emma glanced out the window at the darkening sky. I think it's already here. As if in answer, lightning flashed, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the windows. The rain suddenly intensified, drumming on the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. Too late now, Jake sighed. Roads flood quick out here. Emma set down her bag. Guess I'm staying then. Jake looked uncomfortable with this development but nodded. I'll check the generator. Power goes out easy in these storms. While Jake went outside to the shed, Emma took stock of their situation. She found candles in a kitchen drawer and matches on the mantel. Just as she was lighting the first candle, the lights flickered and died. Jake returned, rain dripping from his hat and jacket. Generator's out of fuel. Been meaning to fill it. He removed his wet outer layers. Sorry about this. Not your fault. Or maybe it is, but I won't hold it against you, Emma said with a small smile. To her surprise, Jake almost smiled back. Hungry? They worked together in the dim candlelight, assembling sandwiches from the refrigerator contents. Jake found an old transistor radio, and they listened to the weather report as they ate. Severe thunderstorm warning remains in effect for Campbell County. Flash flooding reported on County Roads 16 and 22. Residents advised to shelter in place. Looks like you're stuck with me, Emma said. Jake nodded, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. Spare room's not fit for guests. You can take my room. I'll sleep on the couch. I'm not kicking you out of your bed, Emma protested. It's not up for debate, Jake said firmly, but without the edge his voice usually carried. The storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows. Wind howled around the eaves of the old house. Despite the summer warmth, Emma shivered. Cold? Jake asked, noticing. A little. He disappeared and returned with a quilt, which he draped around her shoulders. The fabric carried the scent of cedar and something distinctly masculine. Jake's scent, Emma realized. Thank you, she said, drawing it closer. Jake settled into his chair across from her, the candle between them casting long shadows. My grandmother made that. Used to be on my bed growing up. Emma ran her fingers over the intricate stitching. It's beautiful craftsmanship. She taught Sarah to quilt, Jake said quietly. Sarah made one for our wedding. Blue and cream with horseshoe patterns. Emma remained silent, afraid to break the spell of this rare openness. It's on the bed in the locked room, Jake continued. I haven't slept under it since she died. That must be hard, Emma said softly. Jake's eyes met hers across the table. Melissa said something to you. About Sarah. It wasn't a question, but Emma answered anyway. She told me how Sarah died. That you feel responsible. Jake looked away, his profile sharp in the candlelight. I was supposed to be with her that morning. She wanted to ride the North Trail. I said I had fences to fix first. That doesn't make you responsible for the accident. Doesn't it? His voice was rough. If I'd been there. You don't know that, Emma said gently. Sometimes terrible things just happen, and there's nothing anyone could have done. Jake fell silent. Lightning illuminated the room in brief, ghostly flashes. In one of these moments, Emma noticed a bookshelf in the corner, surprisingly orderly compared to the rest of the house. You read a lot? She asked, changing the subject. Jake followed her gaze. Used to. Haven't much lately. Emma rose and went to examine the shelves. Classic westerns, history, biographies. She pulled out a worn copy of Lonesome Dove. My favorite, Jake said, something warming in his voice. Read it every summer since high school. I've never read it, Emma admitted. You should. It's about more than cowboys. It's about friendship, loyalty, the price of pride. As the storm raged outside, they talked about books, then about Emma's life before coming to Broken Spur, her childhood on her grandparents' small farm, her struggle to find steady work in a changing economy. For the first time, they were just two people sharing stories by candlelight, the barriers between employer and employee temporarily washed away by the storm. Emma woke the next morning on Jake's couch, the quilt tucked around her. Sunlight streamed through the windows, the storm having passed during the night. Jake was nowhere to be seen, but a note on the kitchen table told her he'd gone to check fences damaged in the storm. After making coffee, Emma decided to continue cleaning while waiting for the roads to dry. She'd been avoiding the hallway leading to the bedrooms, respecting Jake's privacy, but the storm had revealed water damage along the ceiling. In the hallway closet, searching for a bucket to catch drips, Emma discovered a small wooden box on the top shelf. It fell as she reached for a bucket, spilling its contents. Among them was a key with a small blue ribbon tied to it. Emma collected the items, returning them to the box. But the key, something about it called to her. She had noticed a locked door at the end of the hallway, the only room she hadn't entered. She knew she shouldn't. It was crossing a line. Yet something compelled her forward, key in hand. The lock turned easily. Emma hesitated, then pushed the door open. Unlike the rest of the house, this room was immaculate. Untouched by time or dust. A quilt, blue and cream with horseshoe patterns, lay perfectly spread across a queen-sized bed. Curtains framed windows overlooking the eastern pasture. The air smelled faintly of lavender. On the dresser sat a collection of framed photographs, Jake and a beautiful woman with auburn hair and a brilliant smile. Sarah. In one, they stood before the barn, paint still fresh. In another, they sat on horseback against a backdrop of mountains. Emma moved through the shrine-like space, heart aching for the love preserved here. On a chair in the corner sat a pair of women's riding boots, polished to a shine. A hairbrush still held strands of auburn hair. So absorbed was she in the emotional weight of the room, Emma didn't hear Jake's return until his voice cut through the silence. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Emma turned, the key clutched in her palm. Jake stood in the doorway, his expression a storm of fury and pain. "I found the key while looking for a bucket. The ceiling is leaking and—" "Get out." His voice was dangerously quiet. "Jake, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "Get out." The words exploded from him, raw and wounded. Emma moved toward the door, but Jake was already striding away. She followed him to the living room. "Jake, please." "I wasn't snooping deliberately. I just—" He whirled to face her. "You just what? Thought you'd poke around in the one place I keep private? The one room I asked you not to touch." "You never specifically mentioned that room," Emma said, immediately regretting her technical defense. Jake laughed bitterly. "Because a locked door isn't clear enough." "I was wrong," Emma admitted. "I invaded your privacy, and I'm truly sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything." His voice cracked slightly. "That room is all I have left of her." Emma felt tears threatening. "I understand that now. But Jake, it's like a museum in there. It's not healthy." "Don't tell me what's healthy," he snapped. "You've been here 2 weeks. You don't know anything about me or what I need." "I know you're punishing yourself," Emma said softly. "Living in chaos while preserving her room perfectly. It's like you don't think you deserve order or peace without her." Jake's face drained of color. "You need to leave. Now." "Jake. I mean it. Get your things and go. You're fired." Emma felt like she'd been slapped. "You're firing me for accidentally finding a key? I'm firing you for overstepping. For thinking you understand something you don't." Emma gathered her cleaning supplies with shaking hands. At the door she paused. "She wouldn't want this for you," she said quietly. "Living half a life. Shrinking your world down to memories and guilt." Jake's expression hardened. "You don't get to speak for her." "Neither do you," Emma replied. "Not anymore." She left the key on the table and walked out the door, tears finally spilling as she reached her car. Behind her, Jake stood in the doorway watching her leave. His anger was already fading, replaced by a familiar hollowness, and something new. The unsettling feeling that Emma Collins might be right. 3 days passed. Emma threw herself into job hunting, scanning newspaper listings and asking around town. But Clearwater was small, opportunities limited. Her savings wouldn't last long paying rent without income. Saturday morning found her at the weekly farmers market, stretching her dollars among the local produce stands. She was examining tomatoes when a shadow fell across the display. "Miss Collins." She looked up to find Miguel, Jake's ranch hand, smiling tentatively. "Miguel. Hello." She tried to sound cheerful. "How are you?" "Better than the boss," he said meaningfully. "He's been like a bear with a thorn since you left." Emma sighed. "I crossed a line." "He had every right to be angry." Miguel shrugged. "Maybe. But the house is getting messy again. And he keeps looking at the phone like it might bite him." Before Emma could respond, she felt another presence behind her. She turned to find Jake himself, looking uncomfortable in the busy market. His hair was damp, freshly combed, and he wore a clean flannel shirt she hadn't seen before. "Emma." He shifted awkwardly, hands in his pockets. "Didn't expect to see you here." Miguel discreetly moved away, giving them privacy. "I could say the same," Emma replied. "I didn't think you were one for crowds." "I'm not." Jake glanced around at the bustling market. "But we needed supplies." An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Jake cleared his throat. "I came to town to find you, actually." Miguel said you might be here. Emma's heart skipped. Oh. I overreacted. The words seemed difficult for him. About the room. No, I invaded your privacy. I shouldn't have used that key. Jake looked at his boots. It's been 3 years. Maybe it's time to, I don't know, move forward somehow. Before Emma could respond, a woman's voice called out. Jake Remington. Is that really you in town before noon on a Saturday? An older woman approached, her gray hair in a neat bun. We haven't seen you at the market since. She trailed off. Well, it's good to see you now. Jake nodded stiffly. Mrs. Parsons. Mrs. Parsons turned to Emma with undisguised curiosity. And you must be the cleaning lady everyone's talking about. Emma smiled politely. Emma Collins. Beverly Parsons. I own the bakery. She lowered her voice. You must be something special to get this one out among the living. Jake cleared his throat. We should finish our shopping. Don't let me keep you, Mrs. Parsons said, eyes twinkling. But Jake, do stop by the church picnic next weekend. People miss you. After she left, Emma noticed Jake's tension. Everyone knows everyone's business in a small town. One reason I stay at the ranch, Jake muttered. They moved through the market together, an unspoken truce established. Jake seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the curious glances and whispered comments following them. At the vegetable stand, the farmer openly stared. Remington. Didn't think you'd show your face after selling those South acres to Silvercrest. Emma felt Jake stiffen beside her. I haven't sold anything, Davis. Not what I heard. The farmer smirked. Word is you're just holding out for more money. Then word is wrong, Jake said coldly. Can't blame you if you did, Davis continued. Place has gone to hell since Sarah died. Shame to see what became of it. Emma felt a surge of protectiveness. Actually, the Broken Spur is looking quite beautiful these days. Jake's been making improvements all spring. Davis looked surprised. That's so. It is, Emma said firmly, adding tomatoes to their basket. The house is coming along wonderfully, and the north pasture is green as emerald. Jake gave her a startled look but remained silent as they paid and moved on. You didn't have to do that, he said once they were out of earshot. I know. But he was being deliberately cruel. Jake's expression softened slightly. Thank you. They finished shopping in companionable silence. Reached Emma's car, Jake hesitated. The job is still yours. If you want it. Emma studied his face. What about the locked room? It stays locked for now, Jake said quietly. But I won't fire you for having an opinion about it. And if I have opinions about other things? Like the ranch? Or those developers? A hint of a smile touched Jake's mouth. I'll try not to fire you for those either. Emma found herself smiling back. In that case, I'll see you Monday morning. As she drove home, Emma glanced at the grocery list she'd made for herself. Without realizing it, Jake had written additions on the same paper: coffee, flour, sugar, his strong handwriting alongside her neater script. 2 different hands, 1 shared list. Over the next 2 weeks, the Broken Spur transformed. Emma tackled rooms that had been closed off for years, airing out mustiness and bringing light to forgotten corners. To her surprise, Jake began helping, moving furniture, carrying boxes, even scrubbing stubborn stains alongside her. One afternoon, Emma was washing windows in the sunroom when Jake appeared with lemonade. Thought you might be thirsty, he said, setting 2 glasses on a small table. Thank you. Emma wiped her forehead with her sleeve. I'm almost finished in here. Jake looked around the now bright space where plants once thrived in decorative pots. Sarah loved this room. She used to start seedlings here every spring. Instead of the pained expression that usually accompanied mentions of his wife, Jake's face held something softer, nostalgia rather than grief. It's a beautiful space, Emma said. Perfect for plants. Jake nodded, running a hand along the empty shelving. Maybe we could get some new ones. Bring some life back in here. We didn't escape Emma's notice. I'd like that. Outside, Miguel called for Jake, something about a broken fence in the north pasture. Jake drained his lemonade. I'll be a couple hours. Feel free to finish early today if you want. Actually, Emma said, I was thinking of starting dinner. If that's all right. Jake looked surprised. You don't have to cook. I know, but I found some recipes in a binder in the pantry. Your mother's, maybe? There's a beef stew that sounded good. A shadow of memory crossed Jake's face. My mom's Sunday stew. Haven't had that in years. Is it okay if I make it? Jake nodded. More than okay. When Jake returned from fixing the fence, the house was filled with the rich aroma of simmering beef and herbs. He found Emma on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. Smells like my childhood in there, he said, settling into the rocking chair beside her. I found some things while I was cooking, Emma said. Photos in a drawer. You as a boy with your dad, I'm guessing. Same eyes. Jake smiled faintly. He taught me everything about ranching. Died when I was 20. Heart attack out in the East Field. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. Jake looked out at his land. He would have liked Sarah. They were alike, both dreamers. Always planning the next big project. Emma hesitated, then asked, what were her dreams for this place? Besides the guest cabins? Instead of shutting down, Jake leaned back in his chair, relaxing. She wanted to make it sustainable. Self-sufficient. Farm-to-table experiences before that was trendy. Trail rides for tourists. Cooking classes using ingredients we grew. He shook his head. I thought we had all the time in the world to build it. It's not too late, Emma said softly. Jake glanced at her. Maybe not. After dinner, they sat at the kitchen table, the dishes washed and put away. Emma noticed Jake studying her. What? She asked. You've changed things, he said. Not just cleaning. Rearranging. Adding touches. Emma tensed. Does it bother you? No, Jake said, surprising her. It's good. The house feels alive again. The next morning, Emma arrived to find Jake repairing a broken section of the porch railing, something that had been on her mental fix-it list but that she hadn't mentioned to him. Morning, he called when he saw her. Thought I'd get this done before you showed up, but there was a nail bent to hell. It looks good, she said, admiring his craftsmanship. Throughout the day, Emma noticed other repairs. A leaky faucet fixed, a loose floorboard secured. Small things but significant. In the barn, she found Jake and Miguel discussing plans to repaint the exterior. When they saw her, Jake beckoned her over. What color do you think? He asked, showing her paint samples. It's your barn, Emma replied cautiously. You've got an eye for these things, Jake said. I trust your judgment. Those simple words, I trust your judgment, warmed Emma more than they should have. That evening, as Emma prepared to leave, she spotted Jake by the newly repaired fence line. He stood straighter than when she'd first met him, shoulders no longer curled inward against the world. Progress, Emma thought. In the ranch, in Jake, and, she had to admit, in her growing feelings for this complicated man who was slowly finding his way back to living. Emma was dusting the living room shelves when a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway. She watched a man in an expensive suit emerge, carrying a leather portfolio. He surveyed the property with calculating eyes before approaching the house. Emma opened the door before he could knock. Can I help you? The man smiled smoothly. Richard Keller, Silvercrest Development. He extended a manicured hand. I'm looking for Mr. Remington. He's in the barn, Emma said, not returning the smile. I can get him for you. And you are? Keller asked, his gaze assessing. Emma Collins. I work here. She found Jake in the barn, repairing tack. There's someone here to see you. Richard Keller from Silvercrest. Jake's expression hardened. Been expecting this. He set down his tools and wiped his hands. Might as well hear what he has to say. In the living room, Keller had made himself comfortable, examining the now clean space with obvious surprise. Mr. Remington, he said, rising as Jake entered. Your property is looking better than I expected. What do you want, Keller? Jake asked bluntly. Straight to business. I appreciate that. Keller opened his portfolio and removed a document. I'm here to present Silvercrest's official offer for the Broken Spur Ranch. Emma moved to leave, but Jake gestured for her to stay. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Emma. Keller's eyebrows rose slightly, but he continued. We're prepared to offer $1.5 million for the property, including water rights and mineral rights. Despite her effort to remain expressionless, Emma couldn't help a small gasp. It seemed like a fortune to her. Not interested, Jake said flatly. Mr. Remington, this is significantly above market value given the condition of the ranch and its current profitability. Keller slid the proposal across the coffee table. Our research indicates you're operating at a loss and have been for some time. Jake's jaw tightened. My finances aren't your concern. With all due respect, we've purchased the Carter property to the east and the Wilson place to the south. The Broken Spur is now surrounded on 3 sides by Silvercrest land. Our development plans. Don't care about your plans, Jake interrupted. This ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Keller sighed. I understand your emotional attachment, but this is business. Our project will bring jobs and tourism to the area. Property values will rise. The economic benefits. Show yourself out, Jake said, turning away. At least review the proposal, Keller persisted, gesturing to the document. The offer expires in 30 days. After Keller left, Jake stood at the window, watching the SUV disappear down the driveway. Emma approached cautiously. $1.5 million is a lot of money, she said quietly. Jake turned, his expression stormy. So you think I should sell too? I didn't say that. But it would solve the financial problems. And then what? Jake demanded. Move to town? Get an apartment? Buy a little hobby farm? There are worse fates, Emma said gently. Jake picked up Keller's proposal and slammed it down on the desk. This land isn't just property to me, Emma. It's my heritage. My identity. I understand that. Do you? Jake's voice rose. My great-grandfather homesteaded this land. Built the original cabin with his bare hands. My grandfather expanded during the Depression when everyone else was selling out. My father worked himself to death keeping it going. And now you're working yourself to death too, Emma said, her own temper flaring. For what? To hang on to something that's dragging you under financially? Jake stared at her. I thought you understood. I understand that you're clinging to this ranch the same way you're clinging to Sarah's memory, Emma said, immediately regretting her words. Jake's face paled. That's not fair. Neither is snapping at me for pointing out reality, Emma countered. You're barely staying afloat. I've seen the bills, Jake. The second notices. The threatened foreclosures. You had no right to look at those. I wasn't snooping. I've been helping organize your office, remember? At your request. They stared at each other, the proposal lying between them like a landmine. This was Sarah's dream too, Jake said finally, his voice low. Our dream together. I can't just sell it to developers who'll turn it into golf courses and timeshares. Emma softened. I'm not saying you should sell. I'm saying you need to think practically about the future. There might be a middle ground. Jake shook his head. There's no middle ground with people like Keller. It's all or nothing. He picked up the proposal and walked to his office, closing the door firmly behind him. Emma sighed, wondering when and how the Broken Spur's future had become so important to her. And when Jake Remington's happiness had started to matter more than it should, the developer's offer created a wall of tension between Emma and Jake. 4 days, they worked in strained silence, the easy camaraderie they developed now replaced with cautious distance. Jake spent more time in the fields, returning only when he knew Emma would be leaving. But Emma couldn't stop thinking about the ranch's precarious finances or Jake's stubborn refusal to discuss alternatives. One evening after work, instead of driving home, she parked at the local library. Emma Collins. Haven't seen you in here before, called the librarian, Mrs. Henderson. I need information, Emma explained. About ranch diversification, agritourism, that sort of thing. Mrs. Henderson led her to a section of books and local resources. Planning a career change? Just research, Emma said vaguely. For the next week, Emma spent her evenings poring over books, articles, and websites. She started a notebook, filling pages with ideas, calculations, and sketches. She researched grants for historic ranch preservation, agritourism initiatives, and sustainable agriculture programs. During her cleaning hours, she began looking at the ranch with new eyes, not just as a space to tidy, but as potential waiting to be unlocked. The old bunkhouse could become guest cabins. The sunroom might serve as a farm-to-table dining space. The expansive pastures offered perfect terrain for trail rides. One morning, Emma arrived to find Miguel repairing an irrigation line near the house. "Miguel," she called, approaching with her notebook clutched to her chest. "Can I ask you something? About the ranch?" He wiped his hands on a rag. "Of course, Miss Emma. What was Sarah's vision for this place?" Jake mentioned guest cabins and trail rides, but what specifically did she want to do? Miguel's weathered face softened. Miss Sarah had big dreams. She talked about weekend experiences, city folks coming to learn about ranch life, riding lessons, cooking classes using our beef and vegetables. He pointed toward the western field. She wanted lavender plantings over there. Said tourists would pay good money for homemade soaps and such. Did they make any progress before she died? Miguel nodded. The bunkhouse renovation was halfway done. They'd started clearing for the riding trails. Jake even built a prototype cabin. It's out past the North Creek. Emma scribbled furiously in her notebook. Why didn't Jake continue after she died? The heart went out of him, Miguel said simply. And the money was always tight. Miss Sarah had connections. Her father was some kind of businessman. She was arranging investors when he trailed off. Thank you, Miguel. This helps a lot. That evening, Emma stayed late, waiting for Jake to return from town. When his truck finally pulled in, she was sitting on the porch swing, her notebook open. "You're still here," he said, surprised. "We need to talk," Emma replied. "About the ranch." Jake's expression closed. "There's nothing to discuss. I'm not selling." "I'm not suggesting you sell," Emma countered. "I'm suggesting you adapt." She handed him her notebook. Jake reluctantly took it, flipping through pages of notes, sketches, and calculations. "What is this?" "Ideas to make Broken Spur profitable again. Based on Sarah's original vision, but updated." Jake stiffened at the mention of Sarah. "You've been snooping again." "I've been researching," Emma corrected. "And talking to Miguel, who cares about this place as much as you do." Jake closed the notebook. "This isn't your concern, Emma. Isn't it?" She stood, frustration boiling over. "I've spent weeks bringing this house back to life. I've invested time and energy and—" She stopped herself. "And what?" Jake pressed. "And I care what happens to it," Emma finished. "To the ranch. To you." Something flickered in Jake's eyes. "These ideas, they're pipe dreams. The startup costs alone." "There are grants," Emma interrupted. "Low-interest loans for historic ranch preservation. I've found at least 3 you'd qualify for." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I see what this place could be. What it was meant to be." Emma stepped closer. "And because I see you coming back to life alongside it." Jake's expression softened momentarily before hardening again. "You're overstepping, Emma. Again." "Someone has to," she shot back. "You're months away from foreclosure, aren't you?" Jake's silence confirmed her suspicion. "Let me help," Emma pleaded. "We can start small, weekend workshops, maybe. Open the sunroom as a farm store selling beef and eggs." Jake's voice was quiet. "This isn't your ranch, Emma. You're my housekeeper." The words stung more than they should have. "Is that all I am to you?" The question hung between them, charged with unspoken feelings. "I don't know what you are to me," Jake admitted finally. "And that's part of the problem." He handed her notebook back. "I need time to think. Alone." Emma nodded, gathering her things. At her car, she turned back to see Jake standing on the porch, her notebook now open in his hands, his expression troubled but thoughtful in the fading light. For the next few days, Jake was quieter than usual, but Emma noticed her notebook moving around the house, from the kitchen table to his desk, to the porch swing. He was reading it, considering her ideas. One morning, Emma arrived to find a flyer on the kitchen counter for the annual Clearwater County Fair. "Thinking of going?" she asked when Jake came in from the barn. He shrugged. "Miguel left it. Said I should consider entering something." Emma picked up the flyer. "Looks like they have a baking contest. Wasn't Sarah known for her apple pie?" Miguel mentioned it once. Jake's expression softened. Blue ribbon winner 3 years running. She had a secret ingredient. "You should enter it," Emma suggested cautiously. Jake shook his head. "I don't bake." "But you helped her, right? You must know the recipe." "It's not the same," Jake muttered, but Emma noticed he didn't immediately dismiss the idea. The next day, Emma found an old recipe box in the pantry while cleaning. Inside, written on a card yellowed with age and splattered with butter stains, was Sarah's blue ribbon apple pie. When Jake returned that evening, Emma had the recipe card waiting on the counter. "I'm not asking you to go to the fair," she said before he could object. "Just make the pie with me. For us." Jake stared at the recipe card, tracing Sarah's handwriting with his fingertip. She always added a splash of bourbon to the filling. That was her secret. "Will you show me?" Emma asked softly. To her surprise, Jake nodded. Making the pie together became an unexpected moment of connection. Jake was meticulous with the measurements, explaining each step as Sarah had taught him. "She insisted on grating the butter for the crust," he said, demonstrating. "Makes it flakier." Emma watched him work, seeing a new side of Jake, patient, detail-oriented, almost tender as he crimped the edges of the crust, just the way Sarah liked. When the pie emerged from the oven, golden and fragrant, Jake fell silent. "It looks perfect," Emma said. "It does," Jake agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "First one I've made since." "I know," Emma said gently. After a pause, she added, "The fair is Saturday. We could enter this pie together." Jake looked up, surprised. I'd go with you. For moral support." Jake considered this. It would be Sarah's pie, not mine. A tribute to her, Emma suggested. A way to share her talent with the community again. 2 days later, to Emma's astonishment, Jake agreed. Saturday morning, Emma arrived to find Jake pacing nervously on the porch, freshly shaved, wearing a clean blue shirt she'd never seen before. "You look nice," she said, trying not to stare. "Haven't been to the fair in 3 years, Jake replied, fidgeting with his collar. "Not since." "I know," Emma said. "We don't have to stay long." The fairgrounds were bustling with activity, livestock exhibitions, craft booths, children racing between game stalls. Jake tensed beside her as they approached the baking pavilion. "Jake Remington." "Well, I'll be," exclaimed the elderly woman at the registration table. "Is that Sarah's apple pie I see?" Jake nodded stiffly. "Thought it was time." The woman's eyes misted. "She'd be so pleased, dear. So pleased." As they moved through the fair, Emma noticed people watching them, whispering behind their hands. Jake grew increasingly uncomfortable. "Everyone's staring," he muttered. "They're just surprised to see you," Emma replied, instinctively taking his arm. "It's been a while." To her relief, Jake didn't pull away. His arm felt solid under her hand. They visited the livestock exhibitions where Jake relaxed somewhat, discussing cattle breeds with local ranchers. Emma watched him gradually emerge from his shell, offering opinions, even smiling occasionally. "Remington, that you?" boomed a voice. Frank Carter approached, slapping Jake on the back. "Dragged yourself away from that ranch at last." "Frank," Jake nodded. "And Miss Collins," Frank tipped his hat to Emma. "You two are causing quite the stir today." "We just came for the baking contest," Emma explained. Frank winked. Sure. Well, good to see Jake among the living again." As he walked away, Jake turned to Emma. "Is that what people think? That you've brought me back to life?" Emma blushed. "People talk in small towns." Before Jake could respond, an announcement came over the loudspeaker calling all baking contestants to the pavilion. They hurried back, joining the crowd around the judges' table. In the traditional apple pie category, announced a woman in a gingham dress, "This year's blue ribbon goes to Jake Remington, with Sarah Remington's classic bourbon apple pie." A cheer went up from the crowd. Jake stood frozen until Emma nudged him forward. "Say something," she whispered. Jake cleared his throat as he accepted the ribbon. "Sarah would be happy to know her pie is still bringing joy to Clearwater County." "Thank you." After the ceremony, as they walked back to the truck with the blue ribbon pinned carefully to the empty pie container, a woman approached them. "Mr. Remington? I'm Beth Wilson from the County Tourism Board. That pie was extraordinary." She handed Jake her card. "If you ever consider offering baking classes or farm-to-table experiences, please call me. We're developing a rural tourism initiative and looking for authentic local experiences." Jake took the card, glancing at Emma with a look that said, "Just like your notebook suggested." The blue ribbon hung proudly in the kitchen, catching the morning light as Emma prepared coffee. The fair had been a turning point. Jake had emerged from his shell, and the tourism board's interest had sparked something in him, a cautious hope. "Morning," Jake said, entering the kitchen. He was already dressed for the day, but instead of immediately heading out to chores, he sat at the table where Emma's notebook lay open. "I've been thinking about these ideas of yours," he said, tapping the page about farm-to-table experiences. "Sarah always said the ranch had more to offer than just cattle." Emma's heart quickened. "And what do you think?" "I think she was right." Jake met her eyes. "And so are you." He pulled out Beth Wilson's business card. "I called her yesterday. She's coming out next week to discuss possibilities." Emma tried to contain her excitement. "That's wonderful, Jake." "I'm not committing to anything yet," he cautioned. "Just exploring options." "Of course," Emma agreed. "But it's a start." Over breakfast, they discussed possibilities: weekend baking classes using the newly cleaned kitchen, trail rides on the gentler horses, maybe even overnight stays in the bunkhouse once it was renovated. "We should look at that prototype cabin Sarah started," Emma suggested. "See what condition it's in." Jake nodded, then hesitated. "Emma, I need to be clear about something." Her stomach tightened. "Yes. If we do this, turn the ranch into some kind of tourist destination, it changes your role here. You wouldn't just be cleaning anymore." "I understand that," Emma said carefully. "Would you want that? To be more involved? Maybe as a partner in whatever this becomes?" The question took her breath away. "A partner?" Jake's ears reddened slightly. "Business partner. You have the vision for it. The organizational skills I lack." "I'd like that very much," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the disappointment that business partner was all he meant. That afternoon, they visited the prototype cabin Sarah had started near the creek. Though weathered from 3 years of neglect, the structure was sound, a charming one-room cabin with a small covered porch. "She designed it herself," Jake said, unlocking the door. "Wanted each cabin to have a theme. This was going to be the angler's retreat." Inside, the cabin was partially finished, pine walls, a rustic kitchenette, space for a queen bed, and a small bathroom. Large windows offered a view of the creek and mountains beyond. "It's perfect," Emma breathed. "With some cleaning and furnishing, this could be ready fairly quickly." Jake ran his hand along the unfinished window trim. "I promised I'd finish this for her." "And now you will," Emma said gently. Back at the house, they spent the evening making lists and sketching plans. Emma suggested starting small, weekend experiences first, then gradually expanding as their reputation grew. "We'll need a name," Jake said. "Something that honors the ranch's history but suggests the new direction." "Broken Spur Ranch and Bakery," Emma suggested. "Simple, straightforward, hints at what we offer." Jake smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "I like it." As Emma sketched a logo idea, Jake watched her hands move across the paper. Without thinking, he reached out and covered her hand with his. Emma froze, looking up to find his eyes on hers. "Thank you," he said softly, "for not letting me give up on this place. On myself." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Jake's thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, sending warmth up her arm. Then, as if realizing what he'd done, Jake withdrew his hand. "It's getting late." Emma nodded, gathering her composure. "I should head home." The next morning, Emma arrived to find Jake in Sarah's room. the door standing open for the first time since she'd known him. He was carefully removing items from the dresser, placing them in a cedar box. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "Thought it was time," he said simply. Emma nodded, understanding the significance. "Would you like some help?" "Not yet," Jake replied. "But maybe later." That afternoon, a printer in town delivered a stack of business cards. Jake handed one to Emma. Broken Spur Ranch and Bakery. Jake Remington and Emma Collins, proprietors. Authentic ranch experiences, baking classes, trail rides. Emma's eyes widened at seeing her name alongside Jake's. "You're serious about this partnership?" "Dead serious," Jake confirmed. "I can't do this alone, Emma. I don't want to." The way he looked at her suggested he might be talking about more than just business, but neither was ready to name it yet. Instead, they stood side by side on the porch, looking out at the land that had been a burden and was now becoming a possibility. The setting sun painted the mountains gold, and for the first time in years, Jake Remington looked toward the future with hope. The weeks following their partnership decision were filled with activity. Beth Wilson from the tourism board had visited, enthusiastically endorsing their plans and offering to feature the Broken Spur in the county's new rural tourism campaign. Jake and Emma had applied for a small business loan to renovate the bunkhouse and complete the prototype cabin. Miguel had begun clearing the overgrown trail paths. Emma had essentially moved her office to the ranch, spending every day working alongside Jake. With each passing day, the boundaries between professional and personal grew increasingly blurred. Their shared vision for the ranch created an intimacy neither acknowledged openly but both felt intensely. Then came the storm. It struck without warning, a violent summer squall that brought hail the size of golf balls and winds strong enough to tear roofing from buildings. Emma and Jake watched helplessly from the house as the storm battered the ranch for hours. When it finally passed, they surveyed the damage in stunned silence. The barn roof had partially collapsed. The newly repaired fences were flattened in multiple sections. Worst of all, the creek had overflowed, flooding the prototype cabin with 2 feet of muddy water. "The insurance won't cover half of this," Jake said grimly as they stood in the cabin doorway, watching Emma's carefully chosen furnishings float in the murky water. Emma squeezed his arm. "We'll figure it out. Make repairs one at a time." But the next day brought more bad news. The loan officer called. In light of the storm damage, the bank needed to reassess their application. The timeline would be delayed by at least 2 months. 2 months puts us into winter, Jake said after hanging up the phone. No tourist season until spring. No income until then. Emma studied the revised budget she'd been working on. "We could scale back the initial renovations. Focus just on the baking classes in the main house for now." "It's not enough," Jake said, frustration evident in his voice. "Not enough to keep the ranch afloat until spring." That afternoon, the black SUV returned. Richard Keller from Silvercrest Development stepped out, looking appropriately somber. "I heard about the storm damage," he said when Emma opened the door. "I'm sorry for the setback." "What do you want, Keller?" Jake asked, appearing behind Emma. "To make a new offer." Keller held out an envelope. "In light of recent events, Silvercrest is prepared to be generous. 1.2 million, less than our original offer due to the damage, but still well above market value." Jake took the envelope but didn't open it. "Still not interested." "Mr. Remington," Keller said, his voice softening with practiced sympathy, "I understand your attachment to this place. But sometimes the practical choice is the right one. This storm is a setback you might not recover from." "We'll recover," Emma interjected firmly. Keller's gaze shifted to her. "Miss Collins, isn't it? I admire your loyalty. But you've only been here a few months. Jake has been fighting this losing battle for years." After Keller left, Jake sat at his desk staring at the unopened envelope. Emma brought him coffee, concerned by his unusual silence. "We're not considering his offer, right?" she asked. Jake didn't answer immediately. 1.2 million would solve a lot of problems. Emma's stomach dropped. "You can't be serious." "I have to be practical, Emma. This ranch has been drowning in debt since Sarah died. I've been holding on by my fingernails." He finally looked up at her. Maybe Melissa was right. Maybe it's time to let go. After everything we've planned? Everything we've started? Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Dreams don't pay bills, Jake said flatly. Or repair storm damage. The next morning, Emma arrived early to continue cleanup efforts. She was searching for financial documents to update their loan application when she found a partially completed contract on Jake's desk, the Silvercrest purchase agreement, with Jake's signature on the initial pages. Her hands trembled as she set it down. He was actually considering it. No, more than considering. He was preparing to sell. When Jake entered, his face told her he hadn't expected her to find the document. "You are going to sell without telling me," Emma said, her voice barely controlled. "After making me your partner." "I haven't signed the final page," Jake said defensively. "I was just reviewing the terms." "You made me believe in this place," Emma said, tears threatening. "In what we could build together." "I wanted to believe too," Jake admitted. "But I've been here before, Emma. Big dreams, detailed plans, then reality hits. So you just give up? Let them turn your family legacy into vacation condos?" "It's my decision to make," Jake said, his voice hardening. "My ranch. My burden. And what am I?" Emma demanded. "Just the housekeeper who got ideas above her station?" The hurt in her eyes made Jake look away. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair," Emma whispered, gathering her things. "But I won't watch you surrender everything you love because you're afraid to fight for it." She walked out the door, tears finally spilling as she reached her car. Behind her, Jake stood in the doorway, the purchase agreement crumpled in his fist, watching her drive away. Emma spent the next 3 days in her small apartment, alternating between anger and heartache. She drafted and discarded a dozen resignation letters, none capturing the complicated emotions swirling inside her. How had cleaning a house turned into this profound attachment to both the property and its owner? On the 4th day, Emma forced herself to go grocery shopping. At the store, she ran into Miguel. "Miss Emma," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Jake's been asking about you. Has he sold the ranch yet?" Emma asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Miguel shook his head. "He tore up the contract right after you left. Been working himself to exhaustion since then, fixing fences, patching the barn roof, pumping out the cabin." Emma's heart squeezed. "Alone?" "Mostly. Some neighbors helped with the barn." Miguel studied her face. "He misses you, Miss Emma." Too proud to say it, but a blind man could see it. Later that afternoon, a knock at Emma's door revealed Melissa, Jake's sister. "May I come in?" she asked. "I think we should talk." Emma reluctantly stepped aside. Melissa surveyed the tiny apartment with undisguised curiosity. "Jake doesn't know I'm here," Melissa began, sitting at Emma's small kitchen table. "He'd be furious if he knew." "Why are you here then?" Emma asked. "To understand what's happening between you and my brother," Melissa replied directly. "And to share some things you should know." Emma remained standing. "There's nothing happening between us anymore. He made that clear." "Did he?" Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Because he called me last night, drunk for the first time since Sarah's funeral, talking about how he'd ruined everything again." Emma's resolve wavered. "He was going to sell the ranch without even discussing it with me." "And you're surprised?" Melissa asked. "Jake's default is to make decisions alone. To bear burdens alone. After Sarah died, he wouldn't let anyone help him, not with funeral arrangements, not with the ranch, not with his grief." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the first person since Sarah who made him consider another way." Melissa leaned forward. "Do you know what he said to me?" "Emma made me believe I could keep the ranch and be happy again. I was too afraid to trust it." Emma sank into a chair. "He said that. My brother has spent 3 years punishing himself for being alive when Sarah isn't. For not being there when she fell." Melissa's voice softened. "Until you came along and made him see a future again." "I'm just his housekeeper," Emma protested weakly. "We both know that's not true." Melissa stood to leave. "The question is, do you care enough to fight for him? Even knowing how stubborn and infuriating he can be?" After Melissa left, Emma paced her apartment, mind racing. That evening, she drove past the Broken Spur. The lights were on in the house, and she could see Jake's silhouette moving in the kitchen. She nearly turned in, but courage failed her. Meanwhile, Jake moved through his days mechanically. The house, so recently brought back to life, felt emptier than ever without Emma's presence. He'd thrown himself into repairs, working from dawn until exhaustion forced him to stop. At night, he sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon, staring at the business cards they'd had printed together. Proprietors. Partners. It had been more than a business arrangement to him, though he'd been too afraid to admit it. One evening, Jake found himself in the kitchen, mechanically washing dishes that had accumulated over the days. Emma would be appalled, he thought, smiling. Faintly. He picked up a dish towel to dry a plate and froze. This simple domestic act brought a wave of longing so intense it nearly buckled his knees. It wasn't just the ranch he was in danger of losing. It was Emma, with her determination, her vision, her belief in possibilities. In him. Jake set down the plate and picked up the phone, dialing a number he'd avoided for days. Beth? Jake Remington. About our tourism initiative. I need to make some changes to the proposal. Can we meet tomorrow? The next day, Jake forced himself to clean. Really clean, the way Emma had taught him. He sorted through papers in his office, organized the pantry, even scrubbed the bathroom. It was therapeutic in a way he hadn't expected, bringing order to his external world while his internal one remained in chaos. In town, Emma was submitting job applications when Mrs. Henderson from the library approached her table at the cafe. Emma, dear. Several people from the Community Improvement Committee are asking about those ranch experience ideas you mentioned. The farm-to-table dinners? Beth Wilson is quite enthusiastic. Emma smiled sadly. I'm afraid those plans are on hold. That's odd, Mrs. Henderson replied. Because Jake Remington was just at the county office filing paperwork for permits. Said something about renovations for tourism purposes. Emma stared at her, heart pounding. Today. Not an hour ago. Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. Whatever disagreement you two had, it seems he's moving forward with your ideas. On her kitchen table at home, Emma found her letter of resignation. She picked it up, read it once more, then tore it to pieces. Early Saturday morning, Emma's phone rang. It was Miguel. Miss Emma, could you come to the ranch today? There's a problem with the kitchen sink. Emma frowned. Miguel, I don't work there anymore. Jake asked specifically for you. Said no one else could fix it right. Emma sighed. Fine. I'll be there in an hour. As she drove the familiar road to Broken Spur, Emma rehearsed what she would say to Jake. She would be professional. Detached. She would fix the sink and leave without getting pulled back into his orbit. But as she turned onto the long driveway, Emma gasped. The ranch entrance was transformed. The old wooden sign had been repainted, now reading Broken Spur Ranch and Bakery, in fresh blue lettering. The fences gleamed with new whitewash. Most surprising of all, the driveway was lined with at least 20 vehicles. Approaching the house, Emma heard voices and laughter. She parked behind Jake's truck and walked toward the commotion behind the barn. There, she found a scene she couldn't have imagined. At least 30 people were working in an organized chaos, some constructing what looked like market stalls, others repairing the storm-damaged barn. Frank Carter was directing a crew installing new roofing. Mrs. Henderson and several women from town were planting flowers along freshly mulched pathways. And in the center of it all stood Jake, holding architectural plans and gesturing toward the bunkhouse where workers were already replacing broken windows. Jake. Emma called, approaching slowly. What is all this? He turned, and the smile that broke across his face stole her breath. Emma. He handed the plans to Miguel and walked toward her. You came. Miguel said there was a problem with the sink, she said, still taking in the bustling activity around them. Jake grinned. There might be. Eventually. But that's not why I asked him to call. Then why? Jake gestured to the community gathered around them. I wanted you to see this. To be part of this. Frank Carter approached, tipping his hat to Emma. About time you showed up. Your partner here has been driving us all crazy with his perfectionism. Partner? Emma looked questioningly at Jake. Come with me, Jake said, taking her hand. He led her to a table set up near the old oak tree. Spread across it were detailed architectural renderings, professional drawings of the Broken Spur transformed into a visitor destination. The prototype cabin, beautifully restored. The barn, converted into an event space. The bunkhouse, redesigned as guest accommodations. And an addition to the main house labeled bakery and farm store. I don't understand, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. How is this possible? The community, Jake explained, gesturing to the volunteers. When word got out that Silvercrest was pressuring ranchers to sell, people rallied. Many of them have known my family for generations. They don't want to see our way of life disappeared under golf courses and condos. Beth Wilson from the tourism board approached with a folder. Emma, perfect timing. The county just approved our grant application. The Broken Spur will be the centerpiece of our new rural tourism initiative. But the storm damage, the loan delays. Emma stammered. Community Investment Fund, explained Frank. We all pitched in. Some with money, others with labor and materials. Jake's not the only one with a stake in keeping this land in local hands. Emma turned to Jake, overwhelmed. You organized all this? I had a good teacher, he said softly. Someone who showed me that asking for help isn't weakness. That community matters. That some things are worth fighting for. Mrs. Henderson appeared with lemonade. Emma, dear, we've been hoping you'd return. Jake's been lost without you, both the house and the man. Jake's ears reddened. Mrs. Henderson. It's true, the older woman insisted. He came to the library asking for those same books you researched. Said he needed to understand your vision better. Emma looked at Jake. You did. I was a fool, Emma, he said, his voice dropping so only she could hear. I nearly threw away everything that matters because I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of caring about someone thin. Around them, the community continued working, giving them a moment of privacy beneath the oak tree. When you left, Jake continued, I realized something. This ranch isn't my burden. It's my blessing. And so are you. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I thought we were just business partners. Jake shook his head, reaching for her hand. We both know that's not true. It hasn't been true for a long time. He gestured to the transformation happening around them. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise I won't give up again. On the ranch. On us. If you'll stay. Emma looked from the architectural plans to the community that had rallied around Jake's vision, her vision, and finally to Jake himself, his eyes reflecting a hope she'd never seen there before. I'll stay, she whispered, squeezing his hand. Partner. 6 months later, Emma stood on the porch of the Broken Spur, watching the sunrise paint the distant mountains. The transformation of the ranch was nothing short of miraculous, not just the buildings and grounds, but the spirit of the place. The main house gleamed with fresh paint, flower boxes brightening the windows. The once neglected garden now flourished with herbs and vegetables. The barn had been restored and expanded to accommodate weekend riding lessons. The prototype cabin by the creek was booked solid for the next 3 months. But the heart of their operation was the new addition extending from the kitchen, the Broken Spur Bakery, where Emma taught weekend baking classes using produce from their garden and eggs from their newly established chicken coop. The aroma of fresh bread and pies now regularly wafted across the property, drawing visitors from 3 counties. Coffee. Jake's voice broke into her thoughts as he joined her on the porch, 2 steaming mugs in hand. Thank you. Emma accepted the mug, smiling as Jake's arms slipped around her waist. Their relationship had evolved as naturally as the seasons, from cautious partnership to deep love. Jake had slowly emerged from the shadow of grief, learning to honor Sarah's memory while embracing his future with Emma. Nervous about today? He asked. Emma nodded. A little. It's our first official grand opening. Everything's ready, Jake assured her. Miguel's got the trail rides organized. The bakery's stocked. The cabins are spotless. I know. It's just hard to believe we've come so far in 6 months. Jake's gaze swept over the property. Couldn't have done it without you. Inside, on the mantel that had once been buried under dust and clutter, sat a new framed photograph. It showed Jake and Emma standing proudly in front of the restored ranch house, their faces alight with happiness. Beside it stood the repaired photo of Jake and Sarah, no longer hidden away but honored as part of the ranch's story. "I have something for you," Jake said, pulling a small box from his pocket. A grand opening gift. Emma opened it to find a delicate silver key on a chain. "It's beautiful. But what does it open?" Jake smiled. "Nothing. And everything. It's symbolic, the key to the ranch. To our home. To our future." Emma's eyes glistened as Jake fastened the necklace around her neck. "I love it. And I love you." "And I love you," Jake replied, the words coming easily now. "More than I thought possible again." The sound of tires on gravel announced their first visitors. Beth Wilson's car led a small convoy from the tourism board, coming for the official ribbon-cutting ceremony. As Emma moved to greet them, Jake caught her hand. "Wait, one more thing." He drew her close and kissed her softly. "Thank you for not giving up on this place." "On me." "Never," Emma promised. The day unfolded perfectly. Visitors toured the grounds, marveling at the transformation. Children squealed with delight during pony rides in the corral. The bakery sold out of everything by noon. Even Melissa and David came, Melissa embracing Emma warmly and whispering, "I've never seen him so happy." Late in the afternoon, Richard Keller from Silvercrest Development made a surprise appearance. Jake tensed when he spotted him, but Emma squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Mr. Remington, Ms. Collins," Keller greeted them. "Quite an operation you've built here." "What can we do for you, Keller?" Jake asked, his voice civil but cautious. "Just observing," Keller replied, glancing around at the bustling property. "Our investors are rethinking the resort concept. Your agritourism model is compelling, more authentic than what we had planned." "The Broken Spur isn't for sale," Emma said firmly. "Not now, not ever." "So I've gathered," Keller said with a rueful smile. "Congratulations on your success. And your historic ranch designation." After he left, Jake looked at Emma questioningly. "Historic ranch designation?" Emma smiled. "Surprise. The paperwork came through yesterday. The Broken Spur is now officially protected from development. Forever." As the day wound down and the last visitors departed, Jake and Emma sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Miguel brought them plates of food before heading home, leaving them alone. "Happy?" Jake asked, his arm around Emma's shoulders. Emma looked at the thriving ranch before them, then at the man beside her, no longer broken, no longer hiding. "Completely." Jake kissed her temple. "You know, when you first arrived, I thought this place was a nightmare to clean." Emma laughed. "It was. And yet you stayed." "Best decision I ever made," Emma said, leaning into his embrace. As darkness fell, lights twinkled from the cabins where their first overnight guests were settling in. The Broken Spur Ranch and Bakery was no longer just a dream on paper. It was their reality, their legacy, their home. And the mess that had brought them together had transformed into something beautiful, just like them.